Okay, welcome Friday afternoon, or just for some, maybe morning. Thank you very much for joining us, joining me this afternoon for this LinkedIn Live. We're going to be bringing in our guest just in a few minutes, Penny Pullan. We're going to be talking about virtual leadership today, and Penny's going to share some fantastic insights. We try to do these LinkedIn Lives quite often, and thank you for everyone who's joining. I know many of you as well, spoken to you either in the past or more recently. So I hope you're doing well. Hope you're managing with whatever's going through in your life right now with these troubling times, but hopefully optimism's on the way. So I'm going to bring in Penny now. We're going to talk a lot of questions. If you've got any questions today that you would like to ask Penny, put to Penny, you'll be able to just write them in the comments section as we go. And we'll try and get around to bringing them up and answering them as much as possible. There'll be a bit of an interactive session as well with Penny, so we look forward to that. So without further ado, we'll crack on and bring Penny in. Penny,
hello.
Thanks for joining me.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
Fantastic. How is it? Is it the sunshine shining where you are today?
Yes, I've had to block it out because it was just beginning to pour in the side of my studio. So yeah, it's all blocked for the moment. If you hear an avalanche, it's a pile of things that are blocking out the sunshine. Oh, how lovely to have sunshine.
It's lovely, isn't it? And it's a myth it rains every day in England. That's not quite true. Maybe 90% of the time.
We have thick snow outside, so yeah.
Fantastic. Well, look, Penny, thank you so much for joining us for this LinkedIn Live. Really great to talk to you. We've got lots of things to cover on this LinkedIn Live. Before we start, I thought it'd be really great to just share with our audience a little bit of background about yourself, your story. And obviously, we want to talk about the big topic of the day, which is virtual leadership in a virtual world. Why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, like many of the people who have joined in, I actually started out life doing business analysis and project management. And it was when I got my first break as a program manager that actually I got dumped in this whole virtual thing. And it was 20 years ago, it will be this year. I was going to fly to New York for a program kickoff meeting with all the people from around the world who are going to be running the different projects that made up the program. Very exciting. We're going to have 2 weeks together in a kickoff in New York, and there would have been such fun in the evenings. Anyway, everything was ready. My bags were packed. The date on my ticket was the 13th of September, 2001. Now, some of you are thinking, oh, that sounds vaguely familiar, September 2001. And of course, the 9/11 tragedy happened. And we were grounded. No program kickoff in New York, no wonderful meals out in the evening, those with huge plates and you just can't finish. None of that happening at all. We just had to stay where we were. I mean, we weren't allowed to fly anywhere for about 3 months. So it was like a kid being chucked in the deep end, to see whether they'd sink or swim. And despite the technology we had at the time, which in 2001 wasn't these, desktop video calls, none of that. We had video conference suites you had to book, but the prime times were always taken by senior managers. And we had lots of conference calls. I remember inordinate numbers of conference calls. And we did sometimes have screen sharing plus calls, which is quite good. But anyway, metaphorically speaking, I swam and I realized, hang on, this virtual leadership, there's something in it. And it seems to be something I can do. Something that really helped was that I'd just been trained in facilitation and working with groups in a room. And because I was quite new to that, I could pick up that theory and begin to think, how can I apply that to people who are dispersed as a network and bring in some of the techniques and things that I'd learned, but in a new way, in a virtual way. And I've worked virtually ever since, initially as a business analyst, project program manager inside Mars Incorporated it was. And then about 14 years ago, I set up my own consultancy, and I've been working with lots of companies, lots of business analysts and project managers and program managers as well since.
Well, fantastic. And obviously your book and your work has probably resonated even more, obviously, in the last 18 months. What have you noticed are the challenges people that you've been talking to have had
Yeah.
in managing virtual leadership?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? I think a lot of people at the very beginning of lockdown thought it's about the technology. And obviously you need the technology. But people are realizing that actually it's not. It's much more than that. I'm seeing a lot of people working silly hours. I mean, somebody I work with was working from 7 a.m. till midnight every day, which is crazy. And you end up, your work quality drops. A lot of people doing back-to-back video calls and thinking you have to do everything live in live meetings on video calls, which is patently not the best way to work. If you do have back-to-back video calls, I advise people to finish at 5 to the hour and start at 5 past the hour. So at least you have a bit of time to get up and stretch so that you can be at your peak. But the best way is to go beyond having to do everything live. And I think that's the first topic we're going to talk about.
Well, let's touch on to that. So I was going to talk about asynchronous working. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, it's asynchronous, which is a huge, horrendous word. Well, it's like synchronous. That doesn't sound too bad, does it?
Yeah.
And that's when you're doing things at the same time, like we are. But somebody watching a recording of this live is watching asynchronously. They don't have to be there at the same time. This is particularly useful when you have teams spread all around the world with wide time zones. But it's also really effective, not if you're going to be really effective working virtually, not to spend your whole time in live meetings, but actually perhaps you can have a short catch up, stand up, something like that at the beginning of the day where you catch up with everybody quickly. Then you all go off and do your work, but you use collaboration tools that mean that you can share comments and ideas as you go along, rather than feeling that you have to be in the same place, or not in the same place, in different places, but looking at each other at the identical same time. So this asynchronous working is really important. So virtual leadership, you need to be good with virtual meetings that are live, but also good with using this asynchronous style when you're working with others, but everybody working at a time to suit them. I mean, if you have colleagues in different time zones, you can hand the work in that follow the sun way. Get things done really effectively. And if you have children at home doing homeschooling, you know, there might be a time when actually perhaps you just need to be there to support them at a particular time, but you can work far better and less interrupted a bit later on in the day. Now,
I'm going to throw a curveball in here, and it's only because it's topical for this week. I won't obviously mention the company, but a very big, Big Four consulting firm had a bit of a wobble this week with some, one of the senior people in the business. Obviously, projecting commentary across their organization on a live feed, which may not have been helpful. What advice would you give to that person, perhaps, or that organization, of how things may come across better in these times?
Well, there are all sorts of things happening, aren't there? I mean, from somebody having a cat picture to all sorts of words being spoken in the background that we shouldn't hear, or even people. Perhaps I think somebody was nipping off for a quick shower in the background and didn't realize that there was a live stream happening. So just be careful. That's one of the reasons why I've got this black material behind me. This is actually solid. It just cuts off and means I have a studio in the corner of my office, and it means that my teenagers can come in, and if they wave at me, it's from the side where they won't interrupt. Have a very quick mute. I can press a mute button right here and cut out sound. So just be prepared. But also, things will go wrong, and there is a little bit more tolerance now with most people. Maybe if you're somebody at the very top of things, like a judge looking like a cat or whatever, but there is a bit more tolerance. I've seen a lot of people with kids coming in and sitting on their parents' lap, and everybody in the meeting waves at them, and then they nip off happily. So a bit more tolerance, but be prepared.
Exactly. But let's talk about managing sub teams and just some real world, out there, people who are joining this call today are going to catch up on it at some point. You know, they're managing teams, distributed teams, both onshore, offshore, internal, external partners and vendors, etc. What advice are you seeing that is working well for people in a virtual setup?
Maybe something that echoes well with the previous connection is be human, not perfect. And I think that helps you to connect with people, form those relationships with people. They may be in vendors, they may be in offshore teams, but put in the time to get to know people a little bit. And that's probably one-to-one, maybe even on the phone. Perhaps you can, each of you at either end can go for a walk and you can have a bit of a conversation. Get to know people. It's hard when you're completely virtual. But yeah, build those relationships. And I think the leadership style needs to shift. If you've been quite a directive leader in the past, even command and control, and you like to see what's going on, then actually don't port that across to virtual. I've heard that there are organizations who are buying up this sort of web, this software that can monitor people's computer screens and where their focus is and their webcams and things. Horrendous, you know. The sort of people that you work with, David, and that I work with are knowledge workers. They don't get motivated by carrots and stick. You know, open things up, be facilitative. If you're a manager, a leader of a team, then your role really is to make sure that all those people who are in your team can work really well. So you want to facilitate them doing brilliant work.
Yeah.
So it's different. You a group who are together, you lead. Maybe you might lead quite facilitatively, but when people are distributed in a network, you need their hearts and minds. You need to engage them, and you need to do what you can to make it as easy as you can for them to do good work. And then if you have multiple different sub-teams, absolutely empower the people leading those teams to do the same brilliant facilitative leadership role.
Now, you talked a little bit about virtual team rooms, and there's some organizations that are already doing that quite well, and others that haven't even started that. What do you mean by that, and what have you seen working well?
Yeah, so you can imagine if you were working on a project in a building 20 years ago, as I was, quite often they had a sort of project war room. It's quite a military metaphor, but there'd be somewhere and you'd have Gantt charts stuck up on the wall. You'd have lots of visual stuff. And we know, you know, with the shift to more agile ways of working, that those sort of visual things are great. So perhaps you could have an area instead of a physical room. Could you have an area online that people can go in and visit, where you have space, where you have the different project documents and the visuals that people can go in and move together? So that's one aspect. But can you also have spaces where people in the team can collaborate together and meet up with each other?
I think I'm sure there's lots of great tools, and they're probably constantly be developed on that. I mean, even Microsoft Whiteboard is really helpful for that. But I'm sure that will constantly evolve, won't it? Because it's almost like bringing in virtual teams together as a place to connect, isn't it? And see the bigger picture of the business, I guess.
Yeah, and there are lots of things that people are using. Miro and Mural are going down particularly well with business analysts. Jamboard from Google is available as well. So lots and lots and lots of them, and people coming up with all sorts of innovative tools constantly, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Although the challenge, of course, is you can have too many tools, can't you? I mean, that's also the other. You can have fatigue from the tools.
The other thing is actually, are you going to get the really brilliant tools through the IT of the company that you're working for or with? That can be one of the biggest challenges.
Absolutely. What about you talked a little bit about gifts and awards and prizes? I mean, these are great things, by the way. So you know, more. What have you seen effective? What are people doing? How can people, you know, implement that? And often where they might not have also, you know, a joined up process within the organization to do that.
Well, let me give you an example. I won an award from the
Oh,
Association for Project Management earlier on in the year.
fantastic.
It was all very exciting. And unfortunately, they gave the wrong time for the announcement. I didn't really know about this, thought, oh, well, I'll go along. And then I found out by Twitter that I'd won the event of the year. I did a webinar on creative collaboration for project managers.
Yeah.
Because I was writing a book on that, and it was all useful about this time last year. Well, no, about May last year, when people were really getting into it and realized this was going to be going for a bit longer. And anyway, they gave me this little award, and it turned up the next day. I found out at about 5:30, and then this little wooden award turned up the next morning, along with some special treats and things to celebrate, which is lovely. So think about, especially when you're virtual, here we are, we've got audio and video, and that's it. Think about how you can add in tangible things, because if you can add in this other senses, the sense of things like the touch and taste and smell, it will really bring things to life. I've heard of lots of organizations where they have team meetings and they put little boxes together. This isn't so much an award, but perhaps it's an award for being part of the team and coping in these horrendous circumstances. Send out a box to everybody, make sure it's got their own dietary requirements and so on met. And then you can all open it up at the same time. Send it out in advance so that people can let it sit for a bit in case the deliverers had the bug, but all open it up together and pull out and add to your virtual experience. So I have a solid wooden award downstairs. So yeah, it's just a nice thing that expands things beyond. Yeah. I think letters. Sorry, I'm jumping in.
Yes.
But handwritten thank you cards, little tiny things. They don't take much time, but they are tangible things that people can touch and that make them feel motivated and that somebody appreciates them, which is huge.
I know, and for some reason I can't bring the comments up today for everyone, so it might be the people's settings on LinkedIn. But I know Simon Harbisher just asked, who's also a BA. He said tracking engagement's a bit harder with comms than live. How does Penny monitor engagement?
I don't do anything very clever. I suppose things like I use various email tools and so on that can say how many people have opened things, but I suppose it's more of a feel, what's happening if I put something out, what responses am I getting back? If it's all completely quiet, then that's not so good. I think I'm not running a project or program at the moment. I've been spending months writing a book. So, but I think if I were, some sort of formal, just a checking in probably once a week or so, who have I touched base with? Out of the key people for that project or program, who are the people that I have caught up with or interacted with in some way? And who are the key people that I haven't had some sort of interaction with that I probably need to make sure that I do something with in the next week or so?
That's a really good point. And often, just thinking out loud, if you've got large teams, and again, not just your internal teams, your vendor partners, etc. Almost sometimes you need a little bit. When did I last speak to them? When did I have a touch point with them? When did I have some form of communication? There's a software tool in itself there, unless it's already out there.
Well, hopefully you have as a business analyst or project program manager, I hope you have a really good communication plan, looking at all those various stakeholders, as you say, internal, client, in your team and beyond. And they're always way more than you'd imagine at the beginning. You should have a plan of who needs what by when and how often that's going to happen. And maybe you could track the engagement as part of that as well, just to get a feel for responses. Maybe that's going to add loads more work to every project manager, and they're all going, don't suggest things like that, Penny, it's too much.
Hopefully that was helpful, Simon. Penny, why don't we, I know we're going to share something on the screen and we wanted to talk around visuals. Do you want to just tell me a little bit more about that, and then perhaps we can bring up a little bit on the screen?
Absolutely. I think what I'll do is I'll share a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation just to show you and all the people on the stream how they can Also use this. So I've got, hopefully you can see something now.
Yeah, just give me 1 second and I'll bring it up. There we go.
Okay, so if you go down to the bottom left of PowerPoint, you see you have an option which includes a pen. So if I choose pen, then I'm able to write. And here are some things about engaging people. Actually, it's red. I think I'm going to choose a different color because red is a default, but it's not a brilliant color. So let's erase that and let's choose blue instead. There we are. Right. So once you've got pen, you can do this with a mouse or a trackpad, or if you have a, touch screen computer, you can just use your finger on the screen. I'm actually using a graphics tablet, and I'll show you that a bit later. So a few things about engaging people. What works? Well, telling stories works. So often I'll ask people, what was the date on my ticket when I was flying to New York? And what's fascinating is that about 90% of people can come up immediately with the 13th of September, 2001, without having to think, because stories engage people, they draw people in and people remember. The other thing is to think about is visuals. I mean, I'm doing this at the moment just by doing circles and things on the screen. It means that there's something moving in front of you, so you can see differences. I mean, we could, if you wanted to, have a go at actually drawing some simple people, because people are what normally put people off drawing. Would you like to have a go quickly?
Yeah.
Fail-safe cartoon. Yep. The thing to do, grab a pen and a bit of paper, and just draw a squiggle. Any old squiggle. There you are. And then above the squiggle, draw an oval. Mine's more of a circle. And then add some legs. And then draw some arms coming out the top. And that's a pretty decent person. It's much more realistic than the stick person that BAs know and love. This one's much more realistic. The arms come out of the top of the torso, not the middle. The legs are in proportion. And these squiggle people can do all sorts of fun things. I mean, this is very easy. They can do sort of wild and wonderful things. I don't think I'd be able to do that. And you can even have squiggle people riding bicycles, for example. The thing with all your visuals, if you're going to be drawing things, and you can always write underneath, if you're going to be drawing things, just make sure that you get the essence. You don't have to do the whole details. Look, there are no spikes on this bicycle. There's no legs even. There's no helmet. But it's got the essence. What's the essence of a person? It's a body and the head and the handlebars and the wheels. So I'm going to come away, stop sharing that, and I'll then show you how I'm doing this drawing. But you can just use a mouse or a trackpad or a touchscreen.
That was brilliant, by the way. That was almost like a bit like Tony Hart, reminding me of some great artistry skills there. I'm going to start drawing my stick men like that now this afternoon.
Brilliant, because stick men. I mean, I'm not super skinny, but I don't look like that. And in fact, I think you couldn't technically look like that and still be alive. So anyway, it's just as easy as stick men and much more impressive. So what I'm using to draw is one of these Wacom tablets, Wacom Intuos. And as I draw, the cursor moves on the screen. And if I put if I touch the surface, then actually it creates the line. And you can use all sorts of any drawing package, or even PowerPoint, whiteboards, within your virtual conferencing tool. Very helpful. And business analysts, I know, will find that particularly useful. We're getting, visuals just work so well for business analysis and project managers and others when we need to communicate complex things in a way that's quick and easy to understand. You can, with a visual, you can look at something and you can get a holistic idea immediately of what the overview is. Whereas if you want lots of details, you have to read in a linear fashion. You have to go through things much more.
I'm guessing for those, yeah, I was going to say for those who are managing people, that's a great way to perhaps share, the vision and where it's going. And I'm guessing letting those people also engage in that process as well, take over and draw as well. That's really good. We had again, I don't know why it's not coming up on LinkedIn, but anyway, we had a great message here from Cherry, if I pronounced that right. Cherry, she said there are organizations that tracks time rigidly since vendor pays per second of productivity. This is an SOP, of course, to those organizations prior to COVID. How do you feel about these organizations adjusting, or should they loosen these areas as part of the COVID management initiatives?
I think the answer is probably the one that I always give to pretty much anything in projects and programs, is it depends. So if you're billing the client, you probably do need to have a really clear measure of the amount of work that's been done, if that's how you're being paid, how your organization is being reimbursed. The trouble is that doesn't all need to be in the standard blocks of 9 to 5 or whatever. Does 9 to 5 even exist? But how can you measure the inputs? If you need to contractually, you probably still do, but could some of those measured blocks be first thing in the morning or later in the evening and have gaps in the day? That would make sense. But actually, I think virtual shows that what's important is the output.
What about, let's just talk a little bit about the celebrating those personal achievements. And again, in a virtual world, I know we've talked a little bit about gifts, awards, etc. But how have you seen that successfully implemented?
Well, awards and things are helpful. I think I mentioned earlier, something that is incredibly powerful is a written, carefully chosen thank you card to a member of your team. They will remember it. It'll be up on their desk. It's a tangible reminder of something that they've done really well. Making sure that you don't just rush to do the work. It's so easy on projects and programs to think, I've got to do this, this, and this, and I need this document out, and I need these signed off. But just to notice what's happening, who's done well, and also yourself. Stop at the end of the week, at the end of the day even. What's gone well today? Do your own mini retrospective. What's gone well today? What could I have done differently? What do I wish I'd done differently? And in the light of those two, what I've done well today and what I wish I'd done differently, how can I change things tomorrow? Probably makes sense to do that in your teams as well. If you could have a 1% improvement every week, just think where you'd be at the end of all of this.
I was going to say, just on those cards, you just reminded me, other clients that I engage with who, if they're internal within your organization, you'll have their home address generally on their HR systems, and they can do the old-fashioned card in the post with a handwritten letter. I mean, that's the most powerful. But if you don't have that, or if it's an external team, you can still go on these websites that stick a card in the post for you. Like a Funky Pigeon, I think, in the UK, and I'm sure there's lots of them around the world. So I think that's a really good point, isn't it?
But you can post them yourself.
That's true. That's true. Well, you allowed out as a part of that daily? Is that as essential work? I don't know. We have to check that one.
Hopefully, there's a post box near people. Yeah.
But actually, it's that virtual pat on the back, isn't it, to say thank you, and how people can do that. What about? Yeah. I was going to say, sorry, go on, Penny.
I was going to jump in as well and say, I've just been writing for months and months a book on creative collaboration. And one of the things that I worked out doing that is that we tend not to spend much time celebrating and affirming people on projects. Maybe we had a pizza together at the end of a project and then ran headlong into the next one, but actually make that effort to to actually think, how can we affirm people and thank people for what they've done? Perhaps get everyone in the team at the end of a project, or even partway through, to say what they appreciate about other people. You can collect it centrally and then send out to everybody. You know, other people in the team think and really like the fact that you deliver, and they like the fact that you say a cheery hello when you see them on Messenger or whatever it might be.
I know
Somebody
we
just
just had,
popped up saying it's exciting getting a card through the post.
yeah, it was, and again, it was Gordon actually, and I don't know why it didn't come up. We'll have to figure that one out. But yeah, and that's so true, isn't it? So there's a really quick win there for people who want to who generally want to reward their team. Tell me, Penny, just a little bit about random employee connections, because this has been a big topic for a few months with other clients I've spoken to. Again, what's your thoughts on that?
Really, really interesting, because if you're just walking around in a big office and you bump into somebody and you're on the lift together for a few floors, you might have a conversation, and that's not happening because we're just meeting the standard people. I went to a conference. In fact, I spoke at the Professional Speakers Association conference this year, and at their conference they had this thing where you could go into a sort of virtual room and be matched up with somebody, and you'd be put together for 3 minutes of chat. And at the beginning, I think they thought, oh, well, nobody's going to use that feature. But it was one of the most positively rated things at the whole conference.
Wow.
And I got to meet all sorts of people. So perhaps that's something like that would be useful. So when people have a few minutes and they just want to do something completely different, that they can go and meet up with people. But it's something that is not going to happen unless something is done, unless people go out of their way, or if there's some mechanism put in place. So it'd be interesting to hear if people do have this in their organizations. Perhaps they could comment and let people know how do they bring those in.
I saw a similar thing at a conference in Las Vegas last year with insurance companies, where again exactly that, they would bring everyone into the room, but on the app you would book almost like a random meeting, and then introduce yourself for 5 or 10 minutes. But I think that's really good for internal companies with big organizations where they've lost perhaps a bit of touch and connection, and they're all kind of working in their own ways rather than wholly. I'd love to see if anyone's doing that as well. I think that's a great point, Penny. And what can people do if they don't have that in their organizations right now? And I'm sure those things will build out. What can people do to reach out to other parts of the organization to steer those conversations?
I wonder whether it's good to see what HR are doing. So for one of my clients, they have something called Together Wednesdays, or a particular day of the week where people get together at random. Well, it's the people who want to join in for the particular topic. So have things that aren't just around projects, and then allow breakout rooms and so on, so people can connect. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I know we had another question, but from Gordon, I think, was what tips do you have to encourage people to put on their videos?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Now, people often seem reluctant to put on their videos, especially if they haven't done huge amounts of it before. But that's less of an issue now, because I think loads of us have been on video much of the time. One of the things that helps engage people is seeing faces. So if it makes sense for people to be on video, explain why. Don't expect everybody to be on video just so you can monitor what they're doing and you know that they're sitting in front of their computer and have their eyes open and they're not sort of like this. That's not a good reason for video. But video helps because it adds to the richness of the communication. So if you can convince people that it's important that you understand their reaction to things, that you get their input fully, more than just what they say or don't say, then that can help. If somebody's very reluctant and never puts their video on, then it can be helpful to do it one-to-one so they get more used to it.
Now, just as a final point as well, Penny, we haven't really talked about onboarding of new people into the program. That's often the real bottleneck, isn't it? Particularly if they've not got experience with that organization, they're coming in new. these are real challenges at the moment for people because they're pressed on time. What advice would you give to people where they're bringing in new people, both from the person coming in, but also from the manager who's managing?
The key thing is to remember that if you bring a new person into the team, the team is not the same. You don't have a high-performing team plus one. You have a whole team that needs to start at the beginning and build. So make sure that you then go through those things that will build that whole team up, including this new person, so that you then have a high-performing team of everybody, including the new person. So as a new person, especially contractors joining, they're expected to really hit the ground running. But it still makes sense for them to make sure that they understand who are the other people, what are their roles, what's my role, how do I fit, how do we all work together effectively, how do we communicate effectively, what are our norms, especially around virtual communication, how do we do things around here, and then work on what are our goals and what are we doing, as opposed to just diving in and trying to sort out the goals and get going without having a clue who the other people really are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how you can best work together.
As a real world example, I know, again, organizations are challenged at the moment with getting security IDs to log in if they've got if they need secure laptops, ensuring that initial onboarding call on the first day is organized. Do they have any documentation that they can learn about the company's processes and policies? I think that's a whole area that many companies need support because perhaps it's not been maturely put in place. And that's a big challenge as well. Penny, you've obviously written the book about virtual leadership. I think have you got it there?
I do. I wrote this a few years ago with sort of international project managers in mind. But since then, it's been used by doctors and educators in universities and schools and local government and, all sorts of people. So, I think there's a code for people who are on this if they want to get it.
I think you've kindly given us a 20% off code. So I'll put that in the LinkedIn live chat after this, and we'll also put it on the blog when we've updated that. I know you've got a new book as well coming out in a couple of months, haven't you? In July?
Yeah, it's coming out in July. It's called Making Workshops Work, Creative Collaboration for Our Time.
Fantastic.
And would you believe it, that title, I came up with that well before the pandemic started. So anyway, but it's been fascinating, and being able to bring in real experience from people of their experience over the last year and beyond. So it covers virtual and hybrid and in-person workshops. Hopefully that will be really useful for people.
Fantastic. Well, we'll add a link into that as well, because I think you can pre-order that as well. And I think there might be a discount code on that as well on Amazon. So thank you. Penny, thanks so much for joining us. If people want to reach out to you who are not connected with you, want to connect with you, how's the best way they can do that?
Given that we're on LinkedIn Live, it probably makes sense for them just to connect with me on LinkedIn. Very happy to connect, send people through slides. I can send you through links to the session I did last year that won that award. It's about virtual leadership as well, and happy to have discussions and to answer questions from people.
What would, as a final note, Penny, people are, there's many people I speak to daily, quite burned out at the moment, probably quite tired. It's exhausting for many, juggling many things, both in their business and private life. What advice would you give to them to be able to push through and see the light?
It's become my mantra in lockdown, really, which is be human, not perfect. And I think if you are human, then actually people will connect and things will go better and you're less likely to burn out. So humans don't sit for 3 hours solid in a row. They're not automons. They get up, they move, they have bodies as well. If something else is happening around you as you're trying to work, if you're human and you're focused on being human, rather than perfect, you will stop the work thing. You'll go and pay attention to what's happening around you, make sure that's happening, and then you'll come back and you'll pick up the work. You'll do a great job, but you won't bust yourself to do that. You'll be here to do a great job in the future as well.
Penny, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy. I hope the weather's sunny for this weekend. It's half term for many next week, or at least in the UK, which means they've got to entertain their children even harder between everything else. So have a great weekend. Thanks for joining me. I'll just say goodbye. And I hope you really enjoyed that LinkedIn Live. It was really, really interesting to get Penny's views. We're going to be adding that onto a blog, and we'll post that up so you can rewatch the video. We'll add some of the codes for the books on there as well, and add the links to the books. And look, if you're interested in hearing about other topics that you're interested in, just drop me a line on LinkedIn. If there's anything particular you'd like to hear from, we'll be having more guests coming on LinkedIn Live. And until the next one, we hope to see you soon. Have a lovely, safe weekend, and catch up again soon.